Hello and welcome to Everywoman. I'm Shuli Ghosh. On the programme this week, trading in human misery. Millions are victims of the global trafficking industry, but what's being done to stop it? A religious battleground. One woman struggled to become a Muslim chaplain in the US Army. And how the women of China are challenging attitudes in this rapidly changing nation. According to international experts, around 2.5 million people worldwide are victims of human trafficking. Whether they're forced into labour or prostitution, the end result is the same: modern-day slavery. It's a booming industry worth billions to those in control, and the vast majority of victims, some 80%, are women and girls. Well, in a moment, I'll be talking to experts, Dr. Bridget Anderson, and from Beirut, Haula Matar. But first, in the big cities of Cambodia, demand for cheap sex is everywhere. Women trying to escape poverty are lured with the promise of respectable jobs, only to find themselves forced to work in brothels. This is the story of one victim, 28-year-old Hyun Khan, who was looking for a better life.
My friends told me I could work as a dishwasher in a restaurant in Phnom Penh. But when I got here, they sold me to a brothel. They gave me food, but they didn't pay me. After 6 months, I refused to service the clients and they kicked me out.
Hyun Khan says she doesn't have enough money to return home and made the decision to remain in Phnom Penh as a prostitute.
I want to leave the trade, but I have a 5-year-old son to look after. Before leaving the brothel, I told my regular customers I was leaving, so they came with me. Now it's easier to do my own business.
Hyun Khan claims that on a good night, she could earn up to $10. That's more than the average worker earns in Cambodia. She's willing to risk the dangers of prostitution for the money and flexible hours.
I'm scared of contracting HIV or if a customer tortures me, but there is no other option. Even if I get a job, there is no one to take care of my son. But if the government gives me money, we can return to the province. I can start my own business and look after my son at the same time.
Well, I'm joined now in the studio by Dr. Bridget Anderson, Senior Researcher at the Centre of Migration Policy and Society at Oxford University, and from Beirut by Haula Matar from the International Labour Organization. Welcome to you both. Haula, if I can start with you first. I know that trafficking isn't restricted to sex trafficking, but whatever the form of trafficking, it is a huge issue, isn't it, politically and socially?
Yes, definitely. It is a very big issue, and there has been a huge focus, I think, during the past year or so or more, and mainly the focus has been on the sex trafficking, but I think that there is the problem is bigger than that, and it actually covers men and women and many times children who are trafficked for cheap labor as a new type of slavery, as you said in your introduction.
Bridget, I know there's a specific definition of human trafficking as laid out by the UN, but you don't like emphasis on that term, do you? Why not?
Because I think it creates more problem than it solves. So the UN definition tells you that it's about moving, using force, coercion or abuse for the purposes of exploitation. However, what does exploitation mean? What does force and coercion mean? And why does movement matter? I think all of those questions tend to get brushed under the carpet. OK, well, we'll look at that in more depth in just a moment. In 2003, a United Nations protocol deemed human trafficking a crime. 111 states have signed up to it, and many have introduced impressive anti-trafficking legislation. But in reality, human traffickers continue to operate, and few are convicted. In Cambodia, despite a raft of new measures, much of the work being done to help women is by individuals and non-governmental organisations. Everywoman went to meet the women who managed to escape.
Si Nguyen is among the lucky few who have been given a second chance in life. She was rescued from a Thai brothel 2 years ago. She spent a year in this Phnom Penh Rehabilitation Centre run by the NGO Acting for Women in Distress. Better known as AFICIP, the organisation provides care and counselling for former victims of sex trafficking. Here, the girls are taught literacy and occupational skills to help them reintegrate into society. The program is the brainchild of Mam Somali, herself the victim of sex slavery at an early age.
You know, my experience pushed me to start a visit. I just want to give the opportunity to the girl, to the victim, to have like independence financially, to have like the opportunity to start the vocational training, you know, help them to give them everything.
AFASIP runs 3 such centres, including one for girls under the age of 16. These sanctuaries help the survivors confront past abuses and build their self-confidence.
They just like traumatized when they arrive, because I say to them, you have 2 ways. One way is suicide, because your life is passed in the browser, you have horrible life. Second way, you should survive. Show them that you can do it. Show them that you are not, you know, even you was raping, even you was in the browser, but you are clean yourself.
19-year-old Shrey Kar is determined to make the most of the opportunities the centre has given her. Her poverty-stricken parents sold her to a brothel when she was 6 years old. At 9, she was forced to work as a prostitute. At 16, Shrey Kar was rescued by a kind neighbour and sent to AFASIP's Phnom Penh centre. She took up sewing and now has her sights firmly set on building a better future.
I plan to work in a factory and save money so I can buy my own sewing machine. I want to open my own tailoring business.
While Shrey Kar and her friends are thrilled at the prospect of a new beginning, leaving the past behind can be difficult.
The victim, they feel victim. It's like me, I'm victim, I feel victim all my life. Sometimes it's hard for me to keep it and going on. Even I give all my advice to the girl, but I cry a lot of times also, you know.
Bridget, we know that over 100 states have signed up to the UN protocol against human trafficking. But even though they've brought in anti-trafficking legislation, it doesn't seem to have done much good. Why not?
Well, I think it's quite interesting if you look at the numbers that are thrown about in terms of, you know, 600,000 a year trafficked internationally across borders and so on. But then if you look at the actual numbers of service, the amount of services that are actually provided by states is very small. So, for example, in the UK, we're told that 3/4 of illegal immigrants are victims of traffickers, yet we only have 35 Home Office funded places for victims of trafficking. So there is a huge discrepancy between state rhetoric and actually what they do.
Why don't governments care about these victims?
Well, I think because actually when you're talking about trafficking, in fact, you're dealing with some very difficult issues. You're dealing with often the exploitation of migrant labour, which, as we know in many countries, is vast. And when you actually, if you were actually to try and tackle that, for example, then you would really have to be pouring resources into that, and you'd also have to be having a really close look at your immigration legislation and how that produces vulnerable workers.
Howler, Bridget mentions there that looking at how countries deal with migrant workers is an issue. That's one of the ILO's jobs, isn't it, to produce decent working conditions for migrant labourers? So what's the ILO doing about it?
We are trying actually to start looking at the legislations and changing legislations so as to protect the rights of these migrant workers. For example, we have just managed with our effort and the interest of the Kuwaiti government to issue a decree where sponsors are not allowed to confiscate passports of migrant workers. And we are trying to improve also the legal and legislation system, the legal system meaning the labor courts, so as to speed up, because many times these workers have to stay for months waiting for the case to come to court.
OK, let me bring Bridget in on this. Do you think that kind of approach is going to work, putting pressure on governments to change practices to hopefully ensure that migrant labourers aren't exploited?
Well, I think the trouble is that there's always questions of illegality, because there are lots of ways in which people, migrant workers, break the law, whether they do it on purpose or whether by accident. And then what happens, the employer can say, if you don't do what I tell you, then I'm going to report you to the police and you're going to be deported.
Do you think that that's one of the problems, that many governments don't see the problem with human trafficking per se? They're translating it into a problem with illegal immigrants and with border security.
Well, exactly. So in that instance, of course, despite the fact it's an abuse of vulnerability, you will still get deported. And I think the trouble is that, yes, trafficking is seen as being about immigration, whereas in fact it's about labour exploitation.
One of my problems with all the rhetoric about human trafficking and all the protocols that have come in and all the promises by governments is that very few of these trafficking gangs of criminals who benefit from it are ever imprisoned or ever convicted. Why is that?
I think that governments have to do more about their legal system. Many times when they are caught, one of it is that, you know, corruption is very high in this region. So they can buy their way out. Other times is that there isn't really a system. Most of the time the victims are punished more than those who are smuggling them or the criminals themselves. And this is something that the ILO is working so hard to focus on, is that we have to tackle the issue from its source.
So is there a solution?
I think there is a solution, and I think the solution lies in labour standards and in international labour standards first and foremost, and in giving migrant workers equal rights with citizens.
OK. Ladies, thank you very much indeed for that discussion. That was Dr. Bridget Anderson in the studio with me and Hawla Matar speaking to us from Beirut. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, it is, of course, Ramadan, and for the past couple of weeks, millions of Muslims across the globe have been observing the Islamic holy month through prayer and fasting. But for many women, Ramadan is also a time of stress as they try to juggle jobs, household duties and religious rituals, which go on long into the night. Well, good news, help is at hand. The Islamic media organisation Sound Vision has come up with its 8-step Ramadan plan for sisters. It recommends getting the men and the children to help with the cooking and the clearing up, and organising all-women prayer meetings where childcare is shared amongst the group. But the key message is aimed at reducing women's stress in the kitchen. As the website says, in Ramadan we should be thinking of God, not stuffed grape leaves. Sounds like good advice to me. After the break, a holy battle as a woman soldier fights to be recognised as a Muslim chaplain in the US Army.